On the evening of February the 20th, Aktuelles SportStudio, the German version of Match of the Day, was just kicking off.
Und damit herzlich willkommen im Aktuellen Sportstudio. Herzlich willkommen in unserem neuen Sportstudio.
That weekend, Karl Heinz Rummenigge, the CEO of Bayern Munich, was a special guest on the program.
Herr Rummenigge, wo ist die Demut hin, von der im letzten Jahr so viel die Rede war?
Ich glaube, der Fußball hat nach wie vor die Demut.
Having covered a number of different topics,
Wir haben schon über die Liga gesprochen, wir haben über Corona gesprochen, jetzt wollen wir mal den Blick noch etwas weiter.
the conversation turned elsewhere.
Aber auch Sponsoren und Partner der Liga und Vereine. Was heißt das für Ihre Partnerschaft mit Katar?
When questioned about Bayern's links with Qatar, Rummenigge prevaricated, talking about how Qatar was
Es ist dort eine andere Kultur, es ist dort eine andere Religion.
a very young country with a different culture and a different religion. At this point, the host interrupted.
Also Menschenrechtsverletzungen sind keine Kultur.
Human rights abuses are not culture. In this episode, we ask, what impact will Bayern's sponsorship by Qatar Airways have on German football?
I don't think it's a question of what it will mean for German football in future, but what it already means for German football now.
Matt Ford is a freelance football journalist who covers German football and fan culture, and whose work can be found at DW Sports.
Bayern Munich have been holding winter training camps in Qatar since 2011, and they've been directly sponsored by the Qatari state since 2016, whether that was by Hamad International Airport or more recently by Qatar Airways. It's a textbook case of sports washing in action.
I want to begin with the events of Saturday night. Bayern Munich CEO Karl Heinz Rummenigge made a TV appearance. Could you tell us about this appearance?
He was on a show called Aktuelles SportStudio, which is effectively the German equivalent of Match of the Day. It's broadcast on terrestrial TV channel ZDF on Saturday nights, features Bundesliga highlights, but it also has a studio guest, which is usually a player or a coach or an official from a club which has played near the studio in Mainz on that day. So last week, Bayern Munich had played away at Eintracht Frankfurt, which is just up the road from Mainz, so Karl Heinz Rummenigge was booked on the show. Obviously, he was asked about Bayern's 2-1 defeat, and he was asked about the rest of the day's football, but he was also quizzed about wider-ranging issues, such as the pandemic and also Qatar.
At this point, it might be helpful for us to contextualise Bayern's involvement with Qatar. We need to go back to 2016, don't we?
We need to go even further back, really, I would say. Bayern have been travelling to winter training camps at the Aspire Academy in Doha since 2011, and in 2016 they signed a sleeve sponsorship with Hamad International Airport.
So back in 2016, Bayern approached the Chancellor's office in order to find out how they should proceed in this whole affair. And in return, they receive a memo from the Chancellor's office. What roughly does this memo advise?
It was advised to tread carefully, to express support for reforms in terms of human rights, but also to ensure that any facilities that Bayern directly used, so hotels they stayed in, infrastructure they used, pitches they trained on, had not actually been built using what is effectively slave labour.
So where does Qatar Airways come into all of this?
In 2018, that sleeve sponsorship with the airport was effectively replaced or rebranded under Qatar Airways. They took over the sleeve sponsorship in a 5-year deal worth about 10 million euros a year to Bayern, and in doing so they replaced Lufthansa, the German airline, as the club's official airline after a 16-year stint. Nowadays, Qatar Airways are what is known as a platinum sponsor of Bayern Munich.
Let's fast forward to 2021. Bayern and Qatar are in the news again. Why was this?
Well, mainly due to their participation in the Club World Cup. That's the simple, immediate reason, but also due to the fact that the 2022 World Cup in Qatar is now edging closer and closer. There is a sense, particularly in parts of the German media, these sort of issues are coming to the fore again. So the fact that Bayern had just come back from the Club World Cup in Qatar certainly provided an opportunity for all aspects of German football, from supporters to the media, to take some of these issues into account.
So this offers Bayern supporter groups the chance to protest. What did this look like?
Specifically, elements of the active match-going support at Bayern have long been critical about their club's dealings with Qatar. In fact, barely a home game goes by these days, under normal circumstances, with fans in grounds, without some form of banner, some form of message appearing on the south stand, the hardcore stand, messages for the benefit of the television cameras, and often aimed at the club's hierarchy.
This seems to be a far cry from the response of many other fans around Europe to news of a lucrative club deal. Why do you think that's the case?
I think there's a key bit of context here regarding the relationship between German football supporters and their clubs, and between Bayern supporters and their club. It's not the same as the relationship between, say, the fan of a Premier League club in England, for example, being a member of Manchester United or Liverpool. It might entitle you to access to tickets or other benefits, but it's purely a commercial relationship, whereas in Germany, members are not just members of football clubs, they're members of democratic associations, which is what the football clubs fundamentally are. And they have a say in electing the board in accordance with the 50+1 rule. So when Bayern supporters or Bayern Munich members criticise their club or demand change, they're well within their rights to do so because the club is fundamentally theirs. So when countries like Qatar attempt to use Bayern Munich to launder their image or to sports wash their image, they're effectively using the club, i.e. its members, i.e. the fans, as puppets. But the puppets have some agency and they can act against that and they can resist being used in that way. So, for instance, when annual general meetings are held each year at Bayern, members can put forward motions. And in 2011, for example, one Bayern Munich member proposed a motion which would have required Bayern Munich to adopt a commitment to the UN's human rights principles as part of its club constitution, but the motion was actually rejected by the club's executive board. So I think that's a key bit of context in understanding exactly what motivates not just Bayern Munich supporters, but German football supporters in general to speak up and to criticise in this way, because they fundamentally have a very personal stake in what's going on.
And Bayern's dealing with the supporters groups in this issue has been fairly heavy-handed, hasn't it?
It has, yes. I mean, it's certainly fair to say that some of the comments from Bayern supporters have certainly been a thorn in the side of the club. The whole situation really reached a bit of a peak recently with what on the face of it seemed like a completely different protest, namely a protest against Monday Night Football. Also an aspect of the over-commercialisation of the game, so not entirely unrelated to the issue of sports washing. But back in February last year, Bayern's reserve team, known as the Bayern Amateurs, were playing a third division game against Halle on a Monday night in Munich, when a group of fans held up a banner reading Bayern Amateurs against Monday games. Now, a few weeks later, one of the fans who'd been holding that banner received a letter from the club banning him from all Bayern Munich premises, including the Allianz Arena, so banning him from home games, which was effectively an internal club ban, ostensibly for the quote-unquote unpermitted positioning of this banner at the reserve game. Now, it just so happens that the supporter in question is a member of a fan group which has been very openly critical of Bayern's dealings with Qatar. They're the fan group which is behind a lot of the banners and messages which appear on the South Stand at Bundesliga games. And indeed, the supporter in question had been a speaker at an event in Munich a month earlier on the subject of Qatar and human rights and Bayern's links to the country. It was an event at which former migrant workers who'd worked in Qatar had spoken about the conditions, and human rights activists had also taken part. Bayern Munich had also been invited to the event, but declined to respond to the invitation, leading to the chair, which would have been filled by a Bayern representative, being left symbolically empty. So, at least according to the supporters' lawyer with whom he's appealing this club ban, there is certainly the suspicion that the reason for this ban is not the unpermitted positioning of a banner protesting against Monday Night Football at all, but perhaps something a bit deeper.
So this brings us back to Saturday night and Karl Heinz Rummenigge's appearance on Aktuelles SportStudio. How did Rummenigge respond to Jochen Breyer's question about Qatar?
Basically with a lot of excuses, a lot of deflections and general whataboutism, if I can call it that.
Viel mehr erreicht als in einer permanenten kritischen Haltung. Und ich muss Ihnen offen und ehrlich sagen, wenn Sie sich die Entwicklung in Katar anschauen.
He insisted, as he has done on several occasions over the years, that there's been progress in Qatar in terms of working conditions and human rights. If you speak to human rights groups and activists, they say that if there has been any progress, it's been negligible. He pointed out, for example, that the kafala system, which we discussed, has actually been abolished, which, as I understand it, is legally true, however, hasn't necessarily been implemented on the ground in practice. He also made a point of saying that the kafala system was actually introduced by the British, which is true. However, I don't think that comes as much comfort to workers currently suffering under its implementation by the modern Qatari state, who have made negligible moves to abolish it. He also said that Qatar had introduced a minimum wage in the space of just 2.5 years, which is considerably faster than Germany managed it, which is also a classic case of whataboutism as far as I'm concerned, and simply deflecting the blame. However, the most remarkable excuse was that Qatar is a young country with a different culture and a different religion, at which point the host on Aktuelles SportStudio interrupted and said quite rightly that human rights abuses are not culture. I imagine it's also a fairly insulting suggestion the religion of Islam would condone that sort of behaviour as well.
And in the end, Breyer raised the knockout question: why doesn't the wealthy Bayern Munich show some more morals? That's the crux of the issue, isn't it? That juxtaposition of wealth on the one hand and a lack of morals on the other.
And it's not as if Bayern Munich don't have the choice of which sponsors they choose to deal with. Bayern Munich are a hugely rich football club and in many ways an extremely well-run football club. For all their quite overt commercialism and globalised international marketing, they are a club which adheres to the 50+1 rule. They may be a club which has sold 8.3% stakes to sponsors like Audi, like Adidas and Allianz, but they are still a club which is owned 50+1% by the supporters. And you see on the pitch that they're a club which is extremely well run. One suspects that they don't necessarily need to be involved with sponsors from countries like Qatar, countries which, at the end of the day, are seeking to use Bayern Munich and to use German football and look at the bigger picture, to use football in general as a platform to distract from other issues in their countries, whether that be an economic dependence on dwindling supplies of oil or whether that be moral issues such as human rights abuses. The whole point of these engagements is to distract attention and to launder an image. Yeah, one wonders whether Bayern Munich, who are the biggest and, you can say the greatest club in Germany, whether they really need to be doing that.
So how would you say German football fans are reading this situation between Bayern Munich and Qatar?
Obviously, there's very vocal criticism from among Bayern Munich supporters. I think it is key to point out that the opposition comes very much from the active, match-going, organised hardcore, whether that's the ultras or not. They're at least match-going supporters. And as I said earlier, given the way football clubs are organised in Germany and the very real fundamental involvement that supporters, that members have in their clubs, these are positions which are shared among other German football fans. And no matter what German football fans might think of Bayern Munich on the pitch and Bayern Munich's transfer policy, or the fact that they've won however many Bundesliga titles it is in a row at this point, there is a recognition that Bayern's supporters are very much on the same page as everybody else. I think it's also quite interesting to see how Bayern's fans are quite a good example of how support for your football club, week in, week out, home and away, doesn't necessarily have to mean blind obedience to absolutely everything your football club stands for. The two are not mutually exclusive, the two are not incompatible. So German fans look at the situation with Bayern with quite a lot of interest, quite a lot of sympathy, quite a lot of support. Ultimately, however, money talks. And as we've seen throughout the coronavirus pandemic, no matter what seems to go on in the outside world, the business of football just continues to roll on and on and on, week after week, being beamed into our living rooms, whether supporters are in the stadiums or not. I don't think it comes as much of a coincidence or a surprise that the favourites for the Champions League this year are Paris Saint-Germain, who are owned by Qatar, Manchester City, who are owned by the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, and perhaps Bayern Munich, who are sponsored by the state of Qatar. And if there's going to be anybody who challenges Bayern Munich domestically in the Bundesliga, it's a football club which was constructed out of nothing by an energy drink company. So while all this is happening, the fans aren't even in the stadiums to use their platforms to speak out against this. So I do feel that there's some frustration as well and some concern as to where exactly all this is leading.
So what do you think the longer term outlook is here? Do you think it's just going to be a case of Bayern waiting for the criticisms to die down and then business as usual?
I think it'll be interesting to see what happens when fans are back in stadiums. German football supporters are incredibly well organised. Bayern Munich's supporters are among the most well organised. They're heavily engaged, heavily involved. They're very aware of what goes on. They are anything but the stereotype of mindless football fans, which might be propagated in certain parts of society. There are some incredibly intelligent figures among them who know exactly what they're doing, but it very much seems to be a case of when and whether they will ever get that platform back in the stadium, which is so important. That's where the pandemic comes into play. Even when fans start to be allowed back into stadiums, it seems likely that it will, at least initially, perhaps for the next few years, be under certain restrictive conditions. So the fans won't have their terraces with standing places to do what they want. They'll have to purchase personalised tickets linked to their ID to enable contact tracing to follow any potential infections. It seems unlikely that perhaps alcohol won't be sold in stadiums. So there'll be all sorts of restrictions in place in stadiums which would seem potentially to counteract the conditions necessary for an active, critical fan culture. So I think it would be very, very interesting to see precisely how even the most well-organised German football fans can stem the tide.
Of course, it's all well and good two English journalists talking about German fans' feelings on this topic, but I wanted to talk to an actual fan to see what they thought.
I hope that this will be a side note in our club and football history.
Alex Fischer is a fan of Bayern Munich and a member of Club Number 12, an independent association of Bayern fans.
My fear is that Qatar and its state-owned companies will spend so much money in football in the next years that they will remain a big player in the future.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you became a fan of Bayern Munich?
It must have been in 1994. I was born in 1986, and there was the World Cup in the United States. Then I saw my first football games, and I remember some of the players from these times. So Roberto Baggio, Jordan Lechkov, or for example, from Germany, Lothar Matthäus. And after this, I began to be interested in club football. And I had a look, what could be my club? An aunt of mine was supporter of Eintracht Braunschweig. They played in the third or fourth division in these times, so it was not interesting for me as a young guy. My local club would have been Eintracht Frankfurt, but I just didn't like them. And a good friend of mine said, have a look at Bayern Munich. This could be interesting. And at this time, players like Jean-Pierre Papin, Lothar Matthäus, or Oliver Kahn played in Munich.
Everybody talks about the great French players, and they talk about Zidane, they talk about Henry. But for me, Jean-Pierre Papin was absolutely brilliant.
20 minutes for Porto to somehow force the result they need. Oh, that's well struck, and it's in! It's Papin!
And so I began to be more and more interested in Bayern Munich, and after a time, I was a supporter and fan.
How did you get involved with club number 12?
In 2014, during the World Cup, I moved to Munich due to some personal reasons. I tried to get as much into the stadium as possible. On one of these days, I met some guys of club number 12 that were just working in the stadium to make choreography. After some time, I asked if I could help. I became a member for sure. It's just paying $12 a month and you're a member. And I helped more and more. And after a time, they asked me, do you want to do a little bit more? And so I became a really active member of club number 12. For me, the best thing is that I met my girlfriend or person I will marry this year. So it's much more than football for me.
How active are club number 12 on social issues?
We have to look a little bit into the past. We were founded just as an umbrella organization to plan and to organize these stadium choreographies because it wasn't easy in the past to do this in the home games and especially when we played anywhere in Europe or into the world. Before some years, we decided to be more active in other points. So founding monies for social organizations, especially the point we're talking about Qatar. I think we can say today we're really active on many points, not on all points for sure. And we have some ultra organizations in Munich and they have all their own points they're talking about. So I think we're really good on these topics.
When did you first become aware of the links between Bayern Munich and Qatar?
This was in 2011 when Bayern Munich decided to go to Qatar to a training camp. The years before, we were mostly in Italy. This wasn't so far away. This was an easy way to do this. 1 year before, so in 2010, FIFA decided to give the World Cup to Qatar. And so for sure, it was really interesting. We decided in the beginning, let's have a look. Perhaps it could be done some good things by the club over there. But we now saw that nothing happened over there, especially when you talk to Amnesty International or any other social organization over there.
I'm interested in how the wider Bayern fan base feels about the Qatar links. Do you think that it's just support groups, ultra groups who care about this issue, or do you think there is a wider awareness amongst the fan base about the dubious nature of some of the things going on in Qatar?
I think you have to split in 3 parts over there. The ultra organization is really clear. We don't like these Qatar topics. We don't like the sponsorship by Qatar Airways. And we would be very proud and happy if Bayern would decide to change all this. For sure, you have also fans and supporters that are not as active as we are. And that's a big group. They're saying, no, that's not a good idea. Let's search another sponsor. We had Lufthansa before and now we have Qatar Airways. These are 2 big players. Why change it to Qatar Airways? And for sure, there is a small group of supporters that say, we need the money, we want the money. Morality doesn't have any or shouldn't have any aspect in our club. But as I said, that's a small group. Most of the normal supporters don't like the Qatar agreement.
Could you tell us what actions Club Number 12 are taking as a supporters group to respond to these links with Qatar?
Yeah, normally we would have some banners in the stadium, but you also know, like me, it's COVID-19, so we don't have these chances at the moment. So you can find from time to time these banners into the city of Munich or at a training ground at Sebener Straße in Munich. And on the other hand, for sure, we use our social media activities. We're giving press statements, for example, to the big German players like Süddeutsche Zeitung or Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, or the Associated Press from time to time asking us if we have any opinions about this. And for sure, we're talking with them.
German football prides itself on fan ownership structures. Do you think the need for more wealth and power is going to lead to the fans being pushed out of the highest levels of German football?
Yeah, in many clubs in Germany, unfortunately, a lot has developed in this direction over the last 10 to 20 years. The influence of the fan base has decreased in many clubs. We have some clubs as Stuttgart, where the fan base just had some big victories against their own board in the last weeks. But we see that it's getting harder and harder for us in the last years. But we're still fighting, and we still have a chance to win the fight, because the clubs also see that they also need the active fans, because that's, like Karl Heinz Rummenigge once said, is a unique selling point of the Bundesliga. These big crowds in the stadiums, and we are these big crowds.
Do you think many fans have fallen out of love with Bayern because of their dealings with Qatar or other corporate interests?
Absolutely. In the last years, I saw some friends of mine that left the club and just said, that's it, I don't want to go this way anymore. But that's not only the Qatar topic. It's also when Karl-Heinz Rummenigge or Uli Hoeneß are in the media and talking some, let's say it like it is, bullshit about anything, if it is COVID-19 or any politics. That's really hard for some fans. And we have some other supporters, they're still going to football matches, but these are lower tier matches. They're just going to the city club or anything nearby, but not still to Bayern Munich. So for sure, we're losing fans, especially active fans. What Bayern Munich is winning are still fans from other countries, other continents. That is increasing. But in Munich and Germany, we're still, I think, at the bottom point.
So what does the future of German football look like from the perspective of a fan?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure what it will be. We're still fighting, and we will always fight for our type of football. I think we can win this, but there could also be the situation when we're saying, okay, that's it. Let's end this chapter of our lives and search another hobby. What many guys are already doing, ground hopping, seeing other stadiums, especially in Eastern Europe, where the clubs are smaller. It's not so expensive like in Britain and France, in Italy and Germany, and just winning back the joy of seeing football.
You can find Matt Ford's articles on German football and fan culture at DW Sports. Alex Fischer is a fan of Bayern Munich and member of Club Number 12, an independent association of Bayern fans. The music for this episode is provided under the Creative Commons license by Blue Dot Sessions, and the details for the individual songs can be found in the show notes. This episode was produced by myself and Josh Schneider-Weiler. I'm John Mackenzie. Thanks for listening to Football Today.